In more than 20 years of practicing medicine, I've collected interesting facts about your body. Join me on a tour head to toe of
Your body is interesting.
bringing us finally to your extremities. Muscle is from the Latin mus, meaning mouse, and the thinking there is that when your muscles quiver, it's like a little mouse running underneath your skin. Uh, as discussed prior, the smallest muscle in your body is connected to the smallest bones in your body, the bones of the middle ear. That muscle is called the stapedius muscle. And the strongest muscle for its size, again, is the tongue. Now, where two bones meet is called a joint, and between the bones is cartilage. Now, cartilage is the consistency more of a dense gel than a hard piece of plastic. It's compressible. So when you squeeze it, it conforms, and when the pressure is released, it again expands, and that's called the gelling phenomenon. Now, since between the bones in your vertebrae, again, are a layer of cartilage, when you stand vertical against gravity, it compresses these discs, and they thin out like a pancake, and actually you're half an inch shorter at the end of the day. Then at night you lay down perpendicular against gravity, and the cartilage expands like a wet sponge into every nook and cranny, such that by the morning when you crawl out of bed, you feel stiff. That's what morning stiffness is. Now, there's folks that claim that they can predict the weather with their joints. If you consider that the forces in nature are incredibly strong. The gravity of the moon can drag the ocean up an incline of sand at the beach at high tide. Changes in the barometric pressure herald changes in weather. Then it is really not so incredible that these forces also act on the cartilage in your joints. In 2003, a formal study was done on the cartilage in the knee, in the pressure in the joint in your knees. The scientist measured that and compared it against barometric pressure, and indeed found a strong association. Speaking of barometers, sailors have a trick to improvise a barometer, which they need to predict whether or not it's going to rain. And they take a cup of coffee, and the barometric pressure puts a dent in the surface of the fluid of the coffee, and the bubbles in the coffee on the surface slide to the center. But when the pressure drops, the fluid surface bows up convex, and the bubbles start to slide to the rim of the coffee cup. And of course, when the barometric pressure drops, storms are coming. Now, your spinal cord is protected in a bony sleeve of vertebrae, protective bone. Another purpose of the bone is because it's rigid, it allows us to stand upright. Otherwise, without it, we'd flop over like a tall stack of jello. As an example, an octopus does not have a bony vertebrae, and consequently a 70-pound octopus can squeeze through a hole the size of a silver dollar. The lowest bone in your vertebral column is called the sacrum, and that's from the Latin sacere, meaning sacred. And where that comes from is since the last bone in the body to rot in a grave is the sacrum, it's a large triangular chunk of bone. People used to believe that that bone persisted and served as sort of a template, a focal point for which the body can then subsequently reassemble itself and resurrect in the afterlife. There's a Da Vinci sketch of a man standing in a circle with his arms outstretched, and it's used to demonstrate the point that the distance fingertip to fingertip of outstretched arms is the same as your height head to foot. And in this sketch, a 6-foot man, that distance is 6 feet. There's a nautical measurement, a fathom, and that's 6 feet. And where that comes from is the way sailors used to measure the depth of the floor of a body of water is they'd throw a rope with a weight on it over the side and then feed it through fist over fist at arm's length, and that distance is 6 feet. And when the anchor bottomed out, they would know how deep the water was, so that it was safe to proceed with the boat without it bottoming out. Now, if fingertip to fingertip is 6 feet, half that from your nose to the distance of one arm is half that, or 3 feet, and that's what a yard is. And this is used by fabric salesmen in an open-air market. They draw out a length of fabric from their nose out to an outstretched arm and sell it by the yard. Here's another body measurement. The length of your forearm from your wrist to your elbow is the same as the length of your foot. Seems like it wouldn't be, but it is. Test it out. Then there's the width of your hand. That's the same as the length of your middle finger. Your heart is the size of your fist, and a uterus is just a tad smaller. It's the size of the back of your hand. 1 out of 10 people are left-handed. Same is true of chimps. Speaking of hands, shaking hands was a convention to show people that when they greeted each other that they weren't holding a weapon, that their hands were empty. Much like a handshake, during the Middle Ages, a knight in armor would lift his visor to show passerbys that he was friend and not foe. And this gesture persists today when a man tips his hat, or in the military when someone salutes. The term for fingers in Greek is phalanx, and what phalanx translates as is soldiers in close order. Crossing one's fingers was a gesture made for luck to allude to the cross, so that the Christians would not attract the attention of the pagans. Now, the wedding ring is worn on the left fourth finger, and where that comes from is there was a belief that a vein ran from that finger to your heart called vena amoris, the vein of love. This anatomical misconception was brought back from Egypt by Alexander the Great. Before that, people wore their wedding ring on their right hand, and the reason was that since most people were right-handed, left was considered aberrant, even evil. In fact, the Latin sinistra for left is the stem of the word sinister. The measurement of 1 inch is the distance from the tip of your thumb to its first joint. The thumbs up sign comes from medieval times, when it was a gesture alluding to using your thumb to seal a document and convey that you concur or you agree. For the Romans, in the arena where they would go to enjoy watching people being slain and killed, the thumbs up sign meant that it would please them if the gladiator would die. There's an expression from Old England, the rule of thumb, and that was that a husband was not permitted to beat his wife with a stick any thicker than his thumb. In the 16th century, a clause was added, and no wife beating after 10 p.m. Now, here's how cracking a knuckle works. That popping sound that you hear when you stretch a joint. Between the bones of the joint and the joint space is a sealed, closed sac that is moist on the inside from fluid, and when you pull on a joint and you stretch that sac bigger and bigger, it forms a little bubble inside the fluid, and if you stretch it even further, the bubble pops, and that's the cracking sound.